Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. Slide decks from the presenters are going to be available below. Thanks for watching.
So today, this last session is going to be um, talking about homelessness and the effects both individuals and families, communities across Oregon. There are a wide array of new public resources and creative strategies government and nonprofit organizations are employing to address the complex challenges. Our panelists will assess the current coordination and delivery of homeless services and supportive of housing in northeastern Oregon communities between local government and public and safety jurisdictions, nonprofit services providers, and healthcare systems. So as stated a couple of times, we've recently now put together, I believe we have three, I don't know, remember the name of your project, Kristy? She has it, what is it? Malheur Turnkey project that's out in Ontario. And then we have Promise Inn that is over in Pendleton, and Stepping Stones in Hermiston. Now, all services trying to provide for those that are homeless in our areas. And right now, we'll start off with just doing introductions of our panelists, and then after that, we'll allow them to give their presentations. So we'll just start off on that end down there.
Good afternoon. I'm Jesalyn Cole. I'm the Executive Director of Stepping Stones Alliance, which is a homeless shelter in Hermiston.
Good afternoon. I'm Shannon Carroll. I'm the Housing Supervisor to Community in Action in Ontario, Oregon.
Good afternoon. I'm Kristy Rodriguez, Executive Director at the Housing Authority of Malheur in Harney County.
Hi everyone, I'm Dana Schultz, she, her pronouns, and I am the PSH Program Manager or Supportive Housing Analyst at Oregon Housing and Community Services.
And I'm Dave Stockdale. I'm the City Manager for the City of Umatilla. We run a co-op with the Western Umatilla County cities for our PATH project, our transitional housing project.
All right, thank you everybody, and we're glad to have you here. We'll just go ahead and turn time over. We'll start, we'll just go the opposite direction and start with Dave and his presentation. They'll each take about 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, so just wanted to do a brief introduction of what PATH is. So PATH is the acronym for Practical Assistance Through Transitional Housing. House Bill 3115 essentially codified the Martin versus Boise case that regulated how municipalities can, what they can do in their public homelessness in public spaces. So we had to create time, place, and manner, reasonably objectionable criteria on how we can do that. We were successful, Umatilla County was successful as one of 8 pilot programs in the state to receive $1 million funding to essentially create a program, whatever we felt was best needed in the county, quite literally from the ground up. And so what we looked at in Western Umatilla County was the need to help individuals that are wanting or having some sort of desire to actually move themselves from their current condition into some sort of better housing condition. And also to make sure that we met with those individuals that it was a low barrier program. So we take you as you are, wherever you might be in your sojourn in life. And so we went about creating that program, and the timing was really well, and Jesalyn's here at the end, but Stepping Stones Alliance was doing similar work. They were an organization in their infancy, and with a lot of really great and grand ideas, a lot of really motivated and caring individuals in the community, and but lacked some general organization and some structure. And so we were able to work together to create a good partnership here, which you'll hear a little bit more about later, to really address homelessness in our in our side of the county. You know, I lived in Eugene for 11 years. 4 of my kids were born there. Very large city. And then coming out to Eastern Oregon, Umatilla, we have 6,000 unincarcerated residents that live in our city. We have one of the state prisons there. And so it's quite a big sort of culture or shell shock, so to speak. But it was baffling to me to think about when I was in Eugene and working for Lane County, we thought as a county for 300,000 people, and then I come over here and we're thinking about cities for 6,000, and then Hermiston 20,000, and then Echo 1,000, and Stanfield 1,500, and we're all sort of compartmentalized. And so this notion that we're all sort of in our own boxes, even though we're so small, just didn't seem. It just seemed kind of silly, especially geographically. We were significantly smaller than even Eugene was, and so. The West Side managers met frequently and often, and with the partnership with Umatilla County, it really kind of it made a lot of sense to say, we are stronger together, and we need to create this regional solution to this very critical problem, and so that's what we started working on.
Can I get that PSH slide up there? Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to talk about our PSH program, or Permanent Supportive Housing. It's at the Affordable Rental Housing Division at OHCS. So this started back in 2019 when we started our statewide housing plan work, and the call for permanent supportive housing came out from communities across Oregon, which was followed by the legislature doing a significant investment in PSH. And so what is PSH, before I kind of go any further about the program? So PSH is permanent housing that's prioritized for the most vulnerable populations experiencing long-term homelessness. It has to be deeply affordable to households living on extremely low incomes. It has to be permanent, so we're not talking about transitional housing or putting a 2-year cap with their lease. And most importantly, it provides comprehensive on-site tenancy support services with appropriate staffing ratios. And these need to be highly accessible to tenants living there, and they need to be voluntary. They can't be a condition of the lease. It has to be rooted in what's called the housing first philosophy. So we're not requiring sobriety or the completion of another program to access these units. It's all about getting that stable housing first, and then talking about that wraparound care and what that specific tenant needs to be stable second. PSH is a proven housing model that best serves households experiencing that long-term homelessness with really complex needs. So that very high-level need is who we want to see moving into PSH units. It's shown to reduce costs across the system, including healthcare, criminal justice system, and those emergency services that cost our communities so much. But yeah, so our PSH program, what does it offer? Because of that significant investment, we now have sticks and bricks funding, so that development capital, that's funded through our Article 11Q bonds. And then we have that long-term project-based rental assistance that we offer, 15-year contracts with eligibility for renewal for another 15 years. So long-term project-based rental assistance to make sure those PSH units are deeply affordable. And then long-term services funding to flesh out that services program, your case manager, your peer support specialist, all working on site to make sure that those tenants are housed for as long as possible. And that's also long-term 15-year contract with the eligibility for another 15-year renewal. So a big part of our PSH program is what's called the Supportive Housing Institute. We require, to be eligible for our PSH funding, your project, your developer, your team has to have gone through our Supportive Housing Institute. This is where you take your developer, your property manager, your service provider, and any other party that you think really needs to be part of the PSH conversation. I know there's people in this room who have been through it. Kristy. And you workshop your plan over about 5 months with your whole team at the table, with the assistance of our technical assistance provider, OHCS, to kind of insert that information about funding. And so once you complete that 5-month journey, you're eligible for funding, and you remain eligible for funding. So it's not like, oh, you do it once, you have to do it again. You remain eligible for PSH funding. So I'm going to pass it to Kristy.
Thanks, Dana. So I'm here to discuss about our experience developing our Malheur turnkey site in Ontario. And it was an experience that I'll never forget because it was super difficult and challenging, but at the same time, it was very rewarding. So Barb Higginbotham, who was the prior Community Action Director, approached the Housing Authority and said, hey, let's do a project turnkey site. And I said, I don't know what turnkey is. I don't really know if we're supposed to be doing this. We're a housing authority. You know, and she said, no, let's do it. It's going to be great. I said, okay. Well, then Barb retired. So she kind of left everything in the housing authority's hands. So we picked up from where we left off and started working with Oregon Community Foundation, submitted all of the paperwork in, and we were approved to do a turnkey site. I didn't know really what I was getting myself into. Again, like I say, it was very new to me, but it was a lot of hand-holding, and we suffered through a few things. So I will let you know just a little back history. In Malheur County, we suffer with a lot of NIMBYism. So not only at a community level, but also it can come at our local level and our county levels. They feel that if we don't build anything that's affordable, folks are just gonna leave. They're not gonna stay, they're just gonna leave. And we knew as a housing authority, because we are a permanent housing provider in the area, that we needed to step up to the plate and actually get something done. So we did our project turnkey site. We were able to meet halfway with the city officials because they were not going to let us convert a hotel. Instead, they said, find something else, because we're not going to do a hotel in a commercial area. So we ended up finding a 17-unit, 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment complex. And that worked for Oregon Community Foundation. I think we are maybe the only ones in the area that have had to turn a turnkey site into an apartment that's an apartment complex. But they met us halfway, which was great. Permitting, things like that went really well. And we actually did the rehab. We closed in May, and by February, we had done a complete rehab on the property, and it took our general contractor about 6 months to turn this whole project around, which was completely dilapidated. So that is like milestones for us to have a GC come in and actually do that work within 6 months of turning a project. So those were kind of our challenges from our experience, and just meeting with the city folks. They had us on a tight leash pretty much about you need to have 24-hour on-site monitors. We want to make sure nothing's happening. And I can tell you that what's great about this property is that 85% of the participants that are residing at our turnkey site are all working families. Either they went in homeless, didn't have a job. We managed to provide jobs between us and Community Action Agency. We've managed to provide jobs from our own agencies to these to a couple of families that are now full benefits and working full-time jobs with either the Housing Authority or Community Action. The reason why I feel that we want to continue to do this type of work is I will share a story, and then I'll be done, and I'll pass it over to Shannon, which Shannon has been our right-hand person at the Community Action Agency. We've been siloed for so many years as far as we're going to do our own work, let the other service providers do their own work, and we're not going to talk to each other. We don't care what they do. We don't want to know what they do. And this has forced us into actually working together as a community. And I'm looking forward to building that relationship, not only with our Community Action Agency, because they do alike services that the Housing Authority does, but also with other community partnerships within our area. So a little story. I had a lady and her son that I met at a shelter. It was a warming shelter that Malheur County opened up at the fairgrounds. This lady was living in her vehicle with her son, and he's 13 years old. And they had her, it was her and him. He was the only minor child staying at the warming shelter. And they had their 2 dogs and their cat, which was Cheese, and she made sure to tell me that the middle name was It. So it was Cheese It. So she had Stayed there at the warming shelter. I said, let's get you applying for some services. You know, we have our turnkey shelter that's going to get ready to open up. Let's get you in contact with Community in Action. Community in Action flowed in behind us and went to the warming shelter as well, and managed to get her into the emergency shelter at that point in time, which the emergency shelter are really tiny homes. They almost look like little sheds. And so she was living in the tiny home, and then she transitioned into Malheur Turnkey. Seeing the look on her face and the look on her son's face that they had their own bedroom, and they had their own space to cook food, and they had their own place to live and have their pets there, made my view on that we need to do this and we need to keep doing it. I'm happy to report that now she has ventured off into a Section 8 voucher, and now she resides at one of our owned properties. And so now she's transitioned into complete permanent housing, and she's done that from the month of February when she moved into turnkey to this month, which is August. She has become self-sustainable and able to reside in her own place and have her own place to call home. So I just want to end on that note. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristy. So, don't take that away from me. So just briefly describing what Community in Action is, we provide rental assistance, eviction prevention, homeless assistance, homeless prevention, our sites that we have and share with the Housing Authority. We also have a PSH unit at one of the local apartments, River Bend. We have 6 units there, and provide wraparound services, resources. Our case manager that goes down there works with these individuals daily, every week, and make sure that they can, have that permanent, stable housing in which some of them have never, ever had. We were very lucky. We got additional eviction prevention funds this year, and that really helped. There's a lot of people out there with, 3 or 4 part-time jobs, but they still cannot afford their rent. So we are, processing eviction notices weekly. Our shared partnership, we provide the case management to the turnkey, and that's been wonderful watching these families come in with their children that, are living in a tent or a car and, are transitioning into the turnkey shelter, which is not really, doesn't look like a shelter. So it's so normal for the children that they get to have their own bedrooms, ride a school bus to school. They don't, get dropped off at the shelters, which I know is huge for kids. It's been wonderful. It's also been challenging with the city because they view things differently than they should, but it's been very rewarding all in itself. We do have a few other sites. We're getting ready to open a new one in Noosa that's going to center around women and children. That they'll also have their own bedrooms. It's more communal living, like our 9-bed site we have, but it's all wonderful and plays into a huge part to just provide this stable normalcy for families, which is something that they don't get to experience out on the street, in the car, in a tent, couch surfing. So being able to provide that to the families has been wonderful. So I think that's it.
So I don't know how many of you know about Stepping Stones, so that's where I was going to start, was just give a little bit of history. So we actually started as a warming station, all volunteer run, in 2013, and it was only 100 nights a year. The volunteers thought that that wasn't enough, formed a nonprofit in 2020, and that's when Stepping Stones came to light. And then fall of 2022 is when first staff was hired. So it was volunteer run from 2013 to 2022, which is huge in and of itself that was accomplished. So 2022, first staff was hired, and that's when we started offering consecutive nights of overnight shelter. So went from the 100 nights to 365 and have not missed a night since. And then, as Dave alluded to, Project Path came into existence, and through that partnership, we've actually been able to grow, and we developed land, and now have the overnight sleep center, and have 20 beds in that, and also now have a navigation center with full-time navigation director, and we have our individual shelter units. We have 21 units that people can transition from the overnight emergency shelter into staying into an individual shelter unit. And that comes with access to the navigation center, a computer lab, communal kitchen, laundry facility, showers, and we are able to work with them towards whatever goals they may have to get to permanent housing. You were talking about partnerships, and we obviously have a very unique relationship in a city working very closely with a nonprofit. My background is in nonprofits, so I know that I will beg, borrow, and steal any and all help, funding, whatever it takes to get the job done. So it's been interesting for me to work as closely with the city and see all of the red tape that has to be gone through. So that's been challenging along the way in the site development and getting to where we are now. With that being said, it has opened up doors that we wouldn't have had access to simply as a nonprofit on our own. So I think all of the partnerships along the way are really important, and I know one of the previous panels talked so much about relationship building, and that's what it comes down to. You can get so much more done together than you can on your own and in your own silo. So I think relationships and partnerships really do make things happen.
All right, thank you everyone for your presentation and your information. I find a lot of joy in watching people reach out to help those, especially the homeless population and those who are most vulnerable. It's been fascinating to be here and being a part of so many of the different projects. I serve on the board with Stepping Stones. And in 2020, when I moved here, I've sat in the office with Dave Stockdale a few times just talking about homeless services and what can be provided. And then so I appreciate it, and I appreciate and understand the struggle that has come with the many different programs and projects. So as you guys have mentioned, some of you have mentioned the importance of building relationships and collaborations as a successful strategy for bringing together local government and jurisdictions and nonprofit providers. I'd like to give you a moment to kind of express more about the struggles that you've dealt with, some of the barriers that you've hit, and what you've done to overcome those barriers with developing your projects and your programs.
I'll go ahead and start with the facilities. So one of the reasons why Path settled the facility where it was is because the city of Umatilla, so I'll give you a little weirdness. So Path is actually located in the city of Umatilla with a Hermiston address. So we can thank our mail couriers for not willing to change the addresses. So weird things, how cities move around. So, but we have in the city of Umatilla, we have a zone that we can, it's a secondary zone that we can layer on top of any zone in the city. It's just called a community service zone. And so basically, if it's a publicly owned facility or a nonprofit facility, think church or hospital or these types of things, those facilities can be located inside any zone through a conditional use permitting process. None of the other cities in Western Umatilla County have that, and so we found this facility location was owned in an industrial zone owned by the county. The county donated approximately 2.5 acres of land, and it was inside the urban growth boundary. We annexed it into the city. You know, the process for annexation requires all that land use process, all those public hearings. And Commissioner Dorn, I think, said it best. We had in that public hearing process, it was actually one of the best public meetings I've really been a part of in my 20-year career. Was be able to. There was over 60 people in City Hall that day, and every opinion across the spectrum was there. Highly support, absolutely against, and everybody in between. But everybody was respectful and listened. And when we walked away, I think people felt heard. And so because the zoning requires conditional use, the council was able to listen to some of those comments provided from those who maybe didn't like this location very much, and then direct staff and put into the permit to add some of those conditions to help mitigate some of those impacts. So we have some really cool and unique ways to do that, and would be more than happy to talk to any other cities that are there and get our community development director and others in place. And honestly, we can just send it over carbon copy. We know it works and we know it's legal. So it's a really cool process and it works great. And so that allowed us the creativity to move forward really from day one. And then it was just unbelievably hard. The public process was the easiest process. Everything after that was the hardest thing there. We love our building officials, but they only see black and white, and they are supposed to see only in black and white. But transferring buildings from residential status to commercial status, having things on infrastructure and so on that meets the right code just proved very it delayed a lot of things and ended up costing a lot more money. So building from the ground up is very difficult. Some of these great programs of converting buildings, from me sort of looking on the other side looking in, that seems like its own set of unique challenges and problems, but also, so I don't think there's really easy solutions, but I think that's sort of the message here is that, you know, sometimes the best things are the hardest things to do, and I think that this is just a great group and a great panel to be a part of, not only here, but in this group.
Let's see. Okay, so, you know, developing housing for people experiencing long-term homelessness and have complex needs is pretty challenging in itself. After working with a lot of projects across Oregon, I feel like the biggest two challenges are getting all the players on the same page about the mission of the project, especially the property manager. I think the projects that are really seeing great outcomes have a property manager that really understand what we're trying to accomplish in this housing, and that the standard approach to lease navigation, lease violations, and issuing those violations and how to work with service providers, they really get it. It's different than regular affordable housing or other types of housing. You've got to get creative, you have to be flexible, and you have to be really intentional about working with the service provider and the other services in the communities. And then I also think just like the lack of external resources and services. Just curious, are there any mental health or behavioral health partners in the room? Okay, I see two. Or much. Oh, that's great. Okay, you're surprising me. Normally, they're not at the table, so I'm really happy you're here. That's awesome. So the projects that are also like avoiding major struggles have behavioral health care providers at the table, a part of the services, coming to the building. They're a part of it from the start, from the planning. So I think, you know, I just presented solutions more than problems, but yeah, so that's my answer to that.
Problems. Well, I went over a couple problems that we had with our local city and I would say just city officials, but I think that a couple of problems that we have is, yes, Dana's completely correct as far as making sure that everybody's on the same page. When you bring a lot of service providers into working on different projects that you're working on, or in particular our turnkey site, when you bring multiple folks coming to the table, sometimes there's just too many chiefs in the room, and then it just turns into, it can turn into, well, we're doing this, no, we're gonna do this, no, we're gonna do this. So I think it is important to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because ultimately the final goal is to make sure that the person that we are housing is being cared for, is being taken for, their needs are being met. And so that's been a challenge that we've kind of seen, is making sure that everybody is on the same page. Another challenge is not knowing the unknown. So Project Turnkey right now, we are utilizing our House Bill 5019 funds. By the way, the Housing Authority is also very unique because we are the local planning group. I'm the chair for both Malheur and Harney County. So that's another stress added on top of our turnkey site, on top of, you know, developing housing and what on and so forth. So it is very challenging to know, like I said, not knowing the unknown, meaning how long do we know that these funds are going to be coming in? The last thing that I wanted to do is create a bigger barrier and displace a bunch of families that we've been working with and creating relationships and building them up to make them resilient so that they're able to face and do life on their own. I do not want to displace these folks at the end of the day when the funding runs out. So I agree with what Claudia was saying, is not knowing the unknown is the biggest challenge that I think I could ever do. Every single day I walk into the door, I'm wondering, is this funding going to continue? Are we going to keep being able to continue to help these families, these single individuals, or is it one of these days we're just going to have to cut them off and say, we're sorry, we're out of money? So I think that that's the biggest barrier that we face at this point in time.
For community in action, I think in addition to the turnkey and all of the newness it faced, our tiny shelters went from winter only to year round. And I went out door to door because it sits right in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and knocked on the door, put flyers out to try to get neighbors, allow them to be heard. But essentially at the end of the day, they knew this was coming forth. Surprisingly, a lot of the neighbors were very supportive, but it was there was no in the middle. They were either on board and very supportive or very much against. And, they had the same verbiage that a lot of others do, is we don't want it in our backyard. It's already there. Whether the shelters are there or not, that's still already there. It's in everybody's backyard. And then we had to face city council and explain, the same thing. And these were our tiny shelters from before codes and rulings and regulations had changed. But we did get through, and we have had a phenomenal success of not only, starting them out at the tiny homes, but moving them up to our communal 9-bed and to turnkey. So it's been wonderful, and, hopefully we, like Kristy said, and everybody, hopefully the funding can continue so we can continue to permanently house people.
All right, thank you guys. I have a lot of thoughts that go through my head as we talk about this subject, and something that I've learned in my process as well and working in these different programs is just education. A lot of our residents that live in the areas that they live in are not really truly understanding what homelessness is, but also we have some that believe that bringing in homeless projects will create an increase of homelessness from other areas. But even if you kind of gathered from what Brooke and from some of the data that we get, the people that are homeless in your areas are people that live and have grown up in your areas and would like to continue to live in those areas. So it's just a great opportunity to educate. Make sure you're educating the residents and your those that live in your area. If I could, actually, I even want to throw out that in Hermiston, the housing authority there is putting together a Liberty Village, which is for homeless veterans. And really it just comes down again to education. We're excited to be able to put that together, and we haven't hit some resistance yet. But again, it's one more time, the education to the projects, to those in the community. So now I'm going to actually turn the time over to you and see if you want to ask any questions. Do we have any questions? I can do it in less than 20 minutes. Just kidding.
Hi, I'm Paula Brown from Baker City. I'm here representing ORMEP's DEI Coalition. Thank you so much for this panel. Spend time getting people on the same page on the mission, objective, goal. How in the hell do you do that? And how much time? I mean, it takes a lot of time, and, how do you get people just willing to step back and think about it and do the work?
All right, I'm going to go first because you set me up for a perfect pitch because I would love for folks to reach out to me if you're interested in the Supportive Housing Institute. I think you saw on the first slides of the day that there's only 6 PSH units that we funded in Eastern Oregon. And it's a great project, and I would love to see that number get a lot higher. And so we would love to see more Eastern Oregon teams join the Institute. And part of the Institute is bringing together those partners from the start. So you identify your property manager, your service provider, the owner, developer, architect, and you're just forcing them at the table in person for 5 months to talk about everything from the development budget to the services plan. No one gets to opt out of any subject. And that kind of gets you on the same page from our perspective in the Institute.
Well, I should have been an attorney when I was young and thinking about my career path because I really like to put up a good argument. It's not even so much of being argumentative about it, it's advocacy. So if you keep advocating and advocating and advocating, eventually people are going to start listening. And eventually people are going to start saying, okay, we're going to let you guys do what you need to do, and we're going to support you. We may not be 100% in support of this, but we're going to start supporting you. I feel like we're moving in that direction very slowly, but it takes a village to really raise a community. So if you word it that way, it takes a village to raise a community, and it takes a village to all come together to lift people up. I feel that you would get more acknowledgement that we're trying to do the right thing. So advocacy and making sure that you are always wanting to advocate for it takes a village to raise a community.
I'll add just one last thing.
No, I want to add something.
Okay, go ahead.
So
This is
I
our
was gonna.
communication style.
It's like every meeting.
Taking time to educate. I went to service organizations and did presentations. I still attend different churches to give presentations. Anywhere that will listen, I will go and share what we're doing. I regularly attend the city councils that are involved in our project and offer tours. I invite people out to the site, come see what we're doing, come ask your questions. I will do one-on-one groups, whatever it takes to get more people in the community, not only to understand what we're doing, but to ask those hard questions. And then I have an audience that is listening because they invited me into their space. So that has made a big difference in what we're doing.
I think that's really well said. I was going to say almost the exact same thing. The only other thing I was really going to add to that is from the municipal side and working your local city officials, county officials, mainly because majority of the work that we do at facilities are going to ultimately be inside either the city boundaries or the county boundaries. One of the things I was just going to say, generally speaking, human beings just fear the unknown, and if people are not talking and they're sort of delightfully ignorant, there's no value there. I think one of the things that I think that's been really great, we have Commissioner Timms put you on the spot. She's relatively newly elected, 1.5 years now, is that right? And she's gone about and made this one of her biggest things that she's working on, and she's toured everywhere, and she's talked to every organization I think associated with this. And I just think just becoming this student of the trade, so to speak, and meeting with the right people. If our elected officials are taking that time and that effort and going to that extent, we can get our chief appointed officials to do the same thing. Here on the west side of Umatilla County, the city managers, we get together at least once every single month and we talk about this. If we're not talking about it, then we don't have an opportunity to work with organizations like you and others to be able to support this work and be advocates and to move forward through a unified effort. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other questions?
Yes. My name is Brad, once again, with Urban League. My pronouns are Mr. and Sir. My question is for, I believe it's Jesalyn Cole with the Stepping Stone Alliance. I had a question. Do you have an organization that you guys work with that help the residential participants that need mental and behavior health care? Because our program, we don't have anybody for that.
So we have done our best to form partnerships with agencies that are already in the area. So we work with CCS. Unfortunately, I think they have a list of 60 available jobs right now in their organization. So I believe there's at least a 6-month wait for an intake appointment. So I say that to say, yes, we work with someone, but they're definitely beyond capacity. So we try really hard. So we work with CAPCO, we work with CCS, we work with Blue Mountain. Like, we've formed all the partnerships along the way, and again, relationship building and communication to try to get our clients and guests and members to whatever resource that they're needing. And we search far and wide to figure that out.
Just to say, you know, I moved from Utah, from Salt Lake City, a big city, and I made Umatilla City 6,004 residents. And it's easy to do. It's easy to move to a small town. So if anyone wants to make a move out who has that experience, feel free.
I just wanted to say that CCS has a program, and I think they still have it, where anyone that wants to become a counselor, they pay for your 4-year schooling. So if you know anyone in your towns that may be interested, get the news out. Maybe more people will go into that facility or that program. But anyway, I wanted to ask Mr. Condie, can you give us more information how you were able to get the funds for the veterans building that you're building in Hermiston? Just wanted to get that out there. He did that.
I'm not one of the panelists. I was just filling time. We actually were working with CASA of Oregon, and we were going to apply for 2 different grants. We applied for Home ARP and was awarded that from OHCS. We were awarded just over $7 million, and then we got another $850,000 from FHLB. From Des Moines, and we're appreciative of that. It's a program that's new, that's for out there, dealing directly with homelessness. We are allowed to put a preference to the veterans, as well as part of the reason why we were awarded it is Ogden, where do I work at? Umatilla County Housing Authority. They did some work and getting our HCV vouchers, our tenant-based vouchers, turned over to project-based vouchers. So with us being able to say that we'll be putting 15 project-based vouchers into that program, was able to help so that they can see that there's a guarantee of helping those who are in need and also have subsidized rent abilities.
So I have a question for the ones that are working with the homeless shelter, the turnkey. You guys talk about funding, and it sounds like it's completely being relied on with government, some kind of subsidy, city, state, county, federal. Have you guys looked or thought of different ways, if that doesn't come through, how your funding could still be there?
We have set out and started writing grants and applying just to be proactive on our end. There are several grants out there, some youth-centered, because we do have a youth center as well, and then a lot of homeless youth. So there are a few of us that are applying and trying, so fingers crossed.
We actually do have a lot of grants in place, but as was mentioned earlier in the day, so many grants are project-based and not operations. So we're constantly looking for how to diversify and get more sustainable funding for long-term. We are nonprofit, so we take donations, have some recurring donations, and just delved into fundraising. So we still have tickets available for our raffle, and and we are doing our first fundraising gala in the fall. So we're trying to find different avenues to bring in that funding, because we definitely don't want to see our programming diminish or go away.
All right, if there's, oh, no, this will be our last question, or Brian will yell at me. Just kidding.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, last question is going to be a real fun one. What about coordinated entry? Like, how does that work in terms of like people getting on different lists to access different services? I'm just curious. I know you talked a lot about relationship building, and so I think part of that too is around like data sharing, information sharing, but then there is a requirement for people to be in that coordinated entry system, I believe, in order to access PSH. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. We have, in order to be in any of our shelter sites, we do the coordinated entry. It does open them up to be on any of our lists. And then, of course, we are doing referrals and grabbing community partners who we think would best fit the client, their needs. So we provide a lot of wraparound services within those coordinated entries, especially within our PSH unit. Yesenia is our case manager that directly works the site, and she's wonderful about that. I think she's built really great rapport with the clients and that trust, so that it can continue to go. But yeah, all of our coordinated entries, we just try to resource out lots of referrals, and then they're on many different of our sites and our lists.
So kind of a multifaceted answer. So we're working towards coordinated entry. Fortunately, we haven't had the numbers that we've had to turn anyone away yet. So we're working towards getting to that. But we do use the HMIS, the Houseless Management Information System. So we are getting set up to make that next step. And then we'll have to, do all of that work.
All right, panelists, thank you so much. Everyone give them a hand.